To some, Star Citizen has always been just selling pictures of spaceships to fund so-called vaporware. While some, even as old as 12 years old, have still not been delivered, as the years have continued, less and less JPEGs have been included in those sales. Until just a couple weeks ago,
we don't want to do any more concept promotions ever again.
After a decade of relying on a mixture of in-game spaceships and pictures of concept art of those upcoming, Star Citizen will only be selling the in-game ships from now on to fund their development. And while that's far from ideal, it's a good step in the right direction. Unfortunately, this change wasn't the biggest complaint many players had. Why is Star Citizen selling so many ships? Is this change the effect of years of building up the company processes and workflow to higher efficiency? Or could they be consciously making moves towards more acceptable monetization as they near the launch of Squadron 42? Today I'm going to tell you about Star Citizen's most controversial practice, why it's stopping now, and why it won't actually do all that much to please the angry players. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. At their core, Star Citizen and Squadron 42 have been games built on expectations. Starting in the age of crowdfunding in a very, very different time in the industry, Star Citizen was started in a small office as a very different game. I'll be deep diving into that in a video that's coming out next week, but for now, you've got to know at this time, no game existed, no engine was really viable, and the idea of the game was quite a bit smaller. But CIG found a funding model that worked really well. Sell the idea of ships and gameplay with sleek descriptions and beautiful concept art with trailers, and use the money from those sales to then build said ships and gameplay. Not a crazy equation, and one that likely would have worked well, if it hadn't worked so well. The funding exploded, and it became clear the original ideas for the game could fit in some more functionality. From planet tech to seamless transitions to new professions, the game expanded and the scope crept. And so too did the funding effort. Before long, we were seeing several new introductions of ships every year that didn't exist and had no set date. Some of them were just getting this month. Some we still don't have. They got a bit carried away, but more importantly, the engine and core mechanics took years to build, delaying everything else that needed to go with these ships. Like engineering, one of the key defining mechanics of ship works that determines power management and how the actual components within the ship work, is only just now being tested for the game. When you're concepting out ships for features that haven't even been designed yet, you're gonna run into problems. These problems mean added time in development, more reconcepting of the ship, and a fairly different implementation of the ship and its important features when it finally does arrive in the game after being made. As a member of this community, I can tell you, you will never hear the end of these mishaps, and there are several. CIG is even more aware at this point. There have been ships they wished were never even concepted, because trying to make them actually work has been such a pain.
Retrospectively, if we were designing the Caterpillar today, it would not have doors like that.
Knowing what we know today versus what we knew in 2013.
So we're sort of hamstrung by that design.
And when it comes to getting these ships into the game 10 times out of 10, they're going to sacrifice the looks to make sure it works how it needs to in-game, while still trying to make everything look cool. Since you can refund literally everything in the game for store credit whenever you want, this can lead to ships being entirely abandoned if they make a change there that the people don't like. But what the people built their likes and affections on was based on an idea that they sold of this ship that they might not be able to meet. So it makes sense they would want to stop introducing concepts separately from the process of making the ships in-game. Or does it? Haven't they found the ultimate cash cow here? Why would you stop doing this now? Well, for starters, the amount of concepts that have been sold has already been dropping pretty drastically over the last few years, and in 2025 there hasn't even been one released. So this was already kind of a trend that was coming along. Subsequently, but I don't believe to be directly tied to it, people are just not into buying pictures anymore. At some point, no matter how deep in you are, you do expect to see a difference in how things are being delivered from the game company. And as we're seeing now, the game engine has become more of a finished product around 2024. The company has hired quite a few new people, and development has been more centralized in one location tailor-made for the company. In 2023, CIG moved most of its employees into its Manchester office, putting much of the company within walking distance of each other. Between 2023 and 2025, the ship development team reportedly grew from about 21 people all the way up to around 45. And communication has definitely been tightened to leave less said for our interpretation outside of what they really want to deliver. What is on offer in Star Citizen is still a very unique experience. It now has enough content and features that the game doesn't need to be marketed and funded on ideas as much, at least not when it comes to ships. There is a proper game experience forming, and it does a lot better at selling Star Citizen now than some pictures of ships will. If you package those experience with the sale of actual in-game ships, then you'll probably make a lot more money. I can't prove that, but I've got a bit of a hunch. Trading pictures for actual flyable items is going to lead to more people being interested in possibly buying them. And it's also good to know that this pledge does not include just one caveat, which is some kind of battle cruiser they're working on. So keep that in mind. But no more JPEGs. Star Citizen is still funding its employees through the sale of in-game ships, and hopefully soon more so Squadron 42, and their sales and new players are actually up quite a bit year over year. They are still selling quite a bit of stuff, which we'll talk about soon, but players can still buy ships with just hours worth of in-game credits, or they can rent them for cheaper, and everything ultimately is available for $45. So things are looking better. Why are players still so annoyed? Star Citizen is approaching 200 ships in-game, and besides some close variants, virtually all of these ships are unique, very detailed, specifically designed ships. While it's one thing to build all these ships over the years, technology is changing constantly, and so is the game industry. This is the RSI Aurora, released in 2014 with small touch-ups here and there since. This is the Cutter, released in 2022 with variants to follow over the years. And this is the Mercury Star Runner, released in 2020 and left mostly untouched. All three of these ships are at different levels of completion compared to the current gold standard. If the design practices, ship features, and general advancements are changing every year, then each ship is getting more and more out of date every year. I talk more about this in a video from last year linked below if you want a deeper look. But this problem leads to any number of ships feeling left to rot with old features, unfixed problems, and bad design choices for years at times. Players may then find it annoying seeing pictures of new shiny ships that may do the same thing that their own ship was meant to do, but better, and it can lead to frustration and FOMO. This is not the way to fund your game, and I'm glad they are doing away with it. But changing that from pictures of ships to in-game functional ships that can still be bought at release does not really fix the problem. Many ships are still very outdated, the Aurora being one of them, and that's the most basic starter ship. While it's going through an update right now, it has taken years of complaints, questions, and eventually the company itself quietly removing the whole game package from the game's website before it was attended to. As the most basic and probably one of the most popular ships in the game, I think this should have been handled a while ago and then every year subsequently for the ships that are in this position. But at large, these discrepancies mean you don't really know which features work in any given ship until you can actually get to use that ship in-game. And then there are older concept ships. CIG has actually been doing a good job of releasing any old concept ships, also known as backlog ships, into the game that won't need specific features and mechanics that aren't ready. But that doesn't change the frustration players have after buying those concepts, only to see them sometimes used for marketing, sometimes dangled in front of them, but more often than not just unacknowledged year after year. The saying goes, the later they build your ship and put it in the game, the better, because it won't need to be reworked again before the 1.0 release of the game. And this is true, but it doesn't mean people don't want what they've paid for. Combine this with the weird and poorly timed choices CIG makes regarding monetization and marketing, and it still feels very much to players like the company is not doing everything they could be. They are still limiting the hulls of certain ships in the name of creating rarity in the game, rather than just not selling them. They've tested the waters on putting key ship progression and customization behind a paywall. And sometimes the trailers they put out say things that don't really match what the game is actually meant to portray.
But the thing is, I've died 1,000 times.
Chris Roberts seems to think Star Citizen might be ready for 1.0 by 2027 or 2028. Most folks don't actually believe this, I think, but I think it's part of a bigger effort to legitimize the game and the company a bit more. They need to tighten up their marketing, their messaging, their reputation, and their optics by the time that does happen. This could be part of that. But it's mixed messaging, no longer essentially selling pictures of ships as a good thing, but still creating FOMO and artificial scarcity degrades whatever goodwill it made. Is this actually a step towards a better image, or just a better workflow at the company? Star Citizen has been focusing on becoming more playable this year. After 7 years of waiting for some major tech advancements, they arrived at the beginning of the year. But on the path to those advancements, a lot has been left aside to gather dust. Now updating and fixing those problems is being balanced with a content-driven push to give players more things to do. This has led to marketing that's more focused on the experience, the stories, and the type of characters that players will make. You know, normal game things. Obviously, Squadron 42 is also a big part of this push. Not directly, exactly, but as the strongest opportunity for CIG to prove itself, this is an actual game release, the first in the company's 13-year history. It's been delayed to all hell and is not carrying the best reputation. Chris Roberts hopes its release will rival that of Grand Theft Auto 6 next year. Which is a choice, but hey, people will remember it now, and I think that's kind of the point. These sorts of moves and statements lend the game more presence, and in the chance it does do well, it'll already be known for some reason by many. This is not an uncommon thing to do these days. Word of mouth is definitely the best marketing. To me, it seems they've already begun their campaign towards this game's release, from full chapters of the game on YouTube, to the layout of the entire campaign across the hosting star system, to these kinds of statements. It does all feel built on building legitimacy. At the same time, we're seeing a multitude of smaller user-facing updates, a better-looking website, more login options on the launcher, a clearer effort to fill out the starter selection of ships, and then a pledge to stop selling concept ships, with the obvious expectation that ship sales will need to be further limited in the future. Seriously, they do need to comment on that. These are all things meant to make the average player more comfortable with the game, and I think these moves will continue. Keep an eye out for them and you'll notice them everywhere if you followed the development of this game for more than a year or two. But then there are the mixed signals I mentioned. They retain that shady veneer that many feel looking at the ship backlog or the grossly overstated release dates. CIG has grown as a company in size and efficiency, and one of the places that is most true is the team that builds the ships. Located across the various studios of CIG, this team has doubled in size since 2023 to around 50 people. 50 people dedicated to funding the entirety of 800 plus employees, 4 studios, and 2 game productions. That's a lot of pressure, and it means the monetization strategy is tightly tied to this team's workflow. They've gotten very good over the years too. I covered the entire process one of these ships undergoes from concept to release in a video below if you'd like to check it out. With the improved workflow and headcount of this team, ships have become more personalized, more personalizable, and higher quality in just about every way. They outdo themselves more often than not. So, has this team just managed to reach a pace of production that removes the need for concept ships? Is this just an easy win coming off the back of a workflow shift at the company? I think that's a little bit of the possibility, but I do think even that is part of a bigger shift at the company. Either way, players still want to know, when is my ship going to be released or up to date? A lot rides on your spaceship performing correctly, and as more features like component damage and repair, power management, procedural damage, escape pods, life support, and security systems come online, you don't want to be the one sitting in the ship that came out right before it all and is last in line for an update. The questions surrounding this will only get louder and louder, and I don't know if there's anything CIG can do to avoid the difficult truth that some ships will probably be outdated all the way up until 1.0. Then finally comes the question of monetization. Cosmetics, skins, and decorations for apartments, bases, and ships can go a very long way in making money. An optional subscription also may help out. But one of the biggest questions many still have is, what is the future of ship sales? Most people who hear or think about Star Citizen mainly think about the fact that they're selling some pretty expensive assets, maybe to fund the development of the game, sure, but they are still there, and still being sold, and still something easy to point to. Even if they are pledging to stop selling the JPEGs now, what will the game do to make sure they can live without ship sales in general? Because most people will not be on board with this at launch. Star Citizen's community is actually much more diverse than people give it credit for. There will be a lot of reactions to this news in and outside of the community, so please leave your own thoughts down below so folks can actually see the nuance in how this stuff is received. Because many are going to be happy about this change, but I think everyone is still waiting for certain ships to finally catch up. If CIG is truly trying to turn a corner here, then communication, feature parity, and ship polish are going to need to follow suit. Or this is just going to look like another easy PR win and a minimal change for their reputation. Thank you for watching this video to the end. I hope you learned something new in it, and I'll catch you in the next.